wanted to
Test it out.
No, they have. Take some around.
All right, guys, can we go ahead and get started?
I wanted to join AmeriCorps. I think I'm just gonna and then join AmeriCorps.
All right, now, let's get into another asset. Let's get into natural resources. All right? Now, a natural resources, what we're talking about here is we're talking about things like timber, ore, mine, or oil, that sort of thing, right? So what you do is when you buy it, so, and again, what it is this, instead of being depleted, it's a very similar process. It's called depletion. And it's done on something very similar to the units of production. So, basically, here's what it boils down to. You start by the depletion per unit. And the depletion per unit, that equals the cost minus the salvage value divided by the estimated total units of capacity. So, in this example, you pay $500,000 for the mine. At the end of its useful life, you expect it to be worth zero, nothing, and you expect to extract 250,000 tons of ore. That means every time you take a ton of ore out of the ground, $200 was depleted. Okay, so you paid $500,000 for the mine, that's the cost. At the end, you expect the whole thing to be worth nothing. Over its useful life, you expect to take 250,000 tons of ore out of the mine. That means every time you take out a ton of ore, there was $202 worth of depletion. Does that make sense? And it's the same as the units of production. Okay. Then step two. What you did in this particular year, you extracted 85,000 tons. So it's basically, it's depletion per unit. Times units extracted. And so in this case, there was 85,000, it's $2 per ton, 85,000 tons extracted. So the depletion in this case was 170,000. Okay. And the journal entry is exactly like you'd expect. So it's December 31st. It's the journal entry. Depletion expense will be $170,000. And accumulated depletion was $170,000. Okay? All right.
So did you say it was $2 per ton?
Exactly.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah, you're absolutely right. Greg? Sure. So again, it's the same. It's essentially the same as the units of production, right? So you figure out the cost per ton. So, for instance, this was a couple years back. It was on NPR. What they said is that it was Dutch Royal Shell. So they had an oil, they were drilling oil at the bottom of the ocean. They estimated that deposit had X number of barrels. And then what they did is that was their estimation. And then they, part of the way through, they re-estimated and doubled it. But again, and so to make a long story short, it works, it's the same sort of estimations as before, and it's calculated very similar to units of production.
So do companies find it more favorable to make accurate estimates, or are there companies that slant the truth to benefit them? I mean, is that?
Well, you're supposed to be as honest as you possibly can. Ethics
Right,
you are,
definitely.
but you know, people do fudge.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. Okay, now, let's do this one. Let me do quick study 1010. I'll put it up here. Quick study 1010. And we do that on page 422. Okay. All right. Now, I'll turn on this last one here. I'll turn that camera around. I think it'll be the fastest if I go in here. I appreciate your offer, Junior. Let me kind of figure out how to work this thing before I do anything else, though. Oh, sorry. Okay. Man, a person could shoot. You know, these wires are too dangerous. All right, I'm going to turn this toward the front. Okay. All right. Let's take a look at what we've got here. So it's quick study 1010. So quick study 1010 reads, the Diamond Company acquires an ore mine at the cost of $1,300,000. It incurs additional costs of $200,000 to access the mine, which is estimated to hold 500 tons of ore. The estimated value of the land after the ore is removed is $150,000. Prepare the journal entries for the cost of the mine. Prepare the year-end adjusting entry of 90,000 tons of ore that are mined and sold. Okay? So let's do that. Let me start with a piece of paper here. And let me go quick study 1010. So, in this case, yeah.
So on the last example that you just did, it was $2 a ton. Was that because in the problem it stated that it was going to do it in tons? Like, let's say that instead of tons it was like pounds, then would it be $2
Or
a pound?
like it was oil would be barrels.
Yeah, so whatever it is, it
Whatever
changes
unit they
to.
deal in, yeah. And of course, trees would be board feet,
Okay,
yeah. All right. Yeah, whatever the unit is for whichever natural resource.
okay.
Okay. And I think all these problems just deal in terms of tons, but it's essentially the same thing.
Okay.
Okay. All right. So in this case, don't forget every asset is valued at what you pay for it, plus whatever it costs to working order. So in this case, they paid $1,300,000, but then it cost them $200,000 to make it workable. In this case, they're trying to sell a road or something that they had to build. So $1,300,000 plus 200,000 meant the asset is valued at 1,500,000. And every asset is valued at what you pay for it, plus whatever it costs to get it in working order. So in this case, it was the mine plus some sort of like an access road. So in this case, the ore mine is the name of this asset account. And that asset is debited at $1,500,000. And apparently they paid cash for it. Okay, so that's the value of the asset, they paid cash. So then you figure the depletion per unit. So in this case, there's $1,500,000, that's the cost. The salvage value is $150,000. So the difference, of course, will be the depreciable cost. And they expect to mine 500,000 tons. So every time they extract a ton of ore, it's $2.70. Okay? Then, when they deplete 90,000 tons, okay, so then the depletion expense, and write EXP per expense, it equals $2.70 per ton times 90,000 tons. That comes out to be $243,000. Okay, that's a 3. Okay, so then the journal entry for that will be depletion expense. It'll be debited for the $243,000, and accumulated depletion will be credited for $243,000. Okay? Here's, let me put the printed copy up. Let me make it larger so it's easier to read. Let me give you a minute with that, see what questions there are. And then we'll go on to exercise. So is everybody okay with that? Yeah, Addie.
So the additional cost to bring it up to access the mine, that wouldn't be an expense? It would be
It's the value of an asset.
It would be the value.
Every asset is what you pay for it plus whatever it costs to get in working order. Like, do you remember when we did inventory in 201?
Oh, yeah.
It was, freight in was added to the value of the inventory.
Yeah. I
Okay,
remember.
so what you pay for it plus whatever it costs to get it in using order. Yeah.
But you still journalize it in one entry, even if you're,
Now, the deal is,
Two
this
separate
is how this
transactions?
worked, because like, they could be, what would happen in this thing, suppose there were like different dates. So what they could have done is they could have had ore mine for 1,300,000 on one date, and then they would have ore mine of 200,000 on a different date. But in both cases, the asset would have been, the asset ore mine would have been debited.
so do you have to journalize them together, or could you do them separately?
You could do them separately. Yeah, you probably do them separately just because chances are it happened in different dates. But the important thing is that debit in each case would be the asset or mine. Okay. All right,
I have a
yeah.
question. So the point, 270, is that a baseline for everything? So let's say we went to a next year and we did another one, we would only times it by the 270 again.
Exactly.
We wouldn't add anything from the previous year.
No, it was just, and again, it works the same as it did before. It's subject to the revision, and the revision is basically the same process as we had before. So at some point in time, like I mentioned at Oil Well or Stretch Shell, they said, listen, it turns out there's twice as many barrels down there than we thought. And if that was the case, then they would take the book value, which is how much is left, okay, and they would have just revised it. But it's the same, so it would just be a different revision. But the revision process is essentially the same. Okay, all right. So let me do exercise 1018. And you find exercise 1018 on page 424. Here's how it reads. All right, I'm going to, there we go. I've got to pull this down. Okay, so there's 1018. Here's how it reads. Okay, actually, I'm gonna reach over here and close this one. See if that'll, make sure that's readable. It's, I certainly didn't expect that. Actually, it's the other one that's really good. Yeah, all right. Hey, yeah, thanks, Kevin. Okay.
I have a question.
Sure.
Would the machinery in this case be part of the ore, or would it be machinery?
That's the reason I chose this.
Oh.
And they work differently. So if what happens on this thing, to answer your question, if they're going to dispose of it, if they're going to abandon it, like if you go to Colorado today, and you go in the autumn, it is gorgeous. You know, all those leaves turn, those aspen leaves turn that gold. And all of those hills have the ore dumps. And one of them has the rails that go out in the ore dump, and the car is tipped over. So they ran the last car over, tipped it, grabbed their lunch pail and went home. In that case, when they abandon it like that, then you include it as cost, then you depreciate it on the unit's production method. However, had they disassembled it and sold it so it had a useful life, then you depreciate it on like a straight line basis. So the answer to your question is, if they're going to discard it at the end when the mine's played out, it's depreciated on a unit's production method, on the same basis as the mine. If they're going to continue using it through its normal useful life, then it's depreciated on a straight line schedule. Does that make sense?
What about the cost? Does the machinery get its own machinery cost account? And it's separate from the mine?
Exactly.
But it's just depreciated in proportion?
Exactly. Yep. And that's, so let me show you on this thing. So in this case, all right. So in this case, on April 2nd, 2011, Idaho Mining Company pays $3,633,750 for an ore deposit containing 1,425 tons. The company installs the machinery in the mine costing $171,000 with an estimated 7-year life and no salvage value. The machinery will be abandoned when the ore is completely mined out. So in that case, it's on the same basis as the mine. Idaho begins mining on May 1st, 2011, and mines and sells 156,200 tons of ore during the remaining 8 months of 2011. Prepared to December 31st, 2011, for both the ore deposit depletion and the machinery depreciation. Mining machinery depreciation should be in proportion to the mine's depletion, okay? However, just as before, if instead of abandoning the machinery when the mine is played out, if the machinery would continue to be used to its normal life, then it would have its normal depreciation schedule. Does that make sense? All right, so here's what this particular one looks like. Okay. Yeah. Oh, okay.
Yeah, so is it like you do depreciation separate than depletion? It's like two different entities?
You
right?
do, but the rate is what's in here.
Okay.
Yeah, this will take it'll lose its value in the same portion as the mine in this case.
Okay.
But if it would continue, but if it was just had a normal life, it'd be used elsewhere, then it would be its normal depreciation schedule.
Okay.
All right. So this is exercise 1016.
18.
All right. Okay. So here's the way this works is. All right. I'm sorry, this is exercise 1018. Okay. So in this case, all right, can I have everybody's attention here? All right, we'll get rolling. So what happens here is the annual depreciation. So the way this works is the total accumulated depreciation at date of disposal. Okay. So in this case, what you do is you have, so as far as the depletion, let's start with the depletion. So on the depletion, what you have is you have 3,633,750. That's what they paid for the mine, divided by 1,425,000 tons. So this is dollars and this is tons. That means that it's $2.55 per ton.
Steve,
Yeah.
so the 171,000 is not part of an expense?
Well, I'll show you in just a second. So what we're doing is it'll be done separately. So the machinery will depreciate, and that's the second entry. The mine will deplete, and that's what we're doing now. So you figure the depletion on the mine separate from the depreciation of the machinery. Where they're similar is they're done at the same rate. Okay. So in this case, it's the depletion. So what we have here now is this $2.55 per ton, and then it's 156,200 tons times $2.55 per ton. That means the depletion will be $398,310. The journal entry for that is December 31st. It's an adjusting entry. You have depletion expense. And that'll be a debit, of course, of $398,310. And then you have accumulated depreciation, and I'm going to abbreviate here, of $398,310. Now, and then to follow what you guys were asking about, now what we're going to do is we're going to deal with the building. Because the building is abandoned when the mine is played out, it will be done on the same basis as the mine. So in this case, we have, so this is depletion, that's the one we just did. Now we're going to do the depreciation. Okay. So in this case, we have $171,000 divided by 1,425,000 tons. That means every time they extract a ton of ore, the building depreciates 12 cents. Then they depreciated the same 156,200, and I'll just maybe do it right here, so it's 156,200. That means the depreciation will be 18,744. Now I kind of ran these things together. Does that make sense how that works? So this is the amount per ton, number of tons, the depreciation. Okay? And of course the journal entry for that, of course, is December 31, and you have depreciation expense of 18,744, and I'm going to abbreviate here, accumulation depreciation of 18,744. So let me put up the printed copy, and I just kind of changed the format so it would be okay.
Steve?
Yeah.
Would it be improper, because you want to keep them separate, is the only reason you're doing it, versus if you would have combined them, would you still come up with the same number? or
You
would
got
it
the
be
same
fewer?
number, yeah. You would have done it. It would have got the exact same number, one
Okay.
step.
But
I did it
but
all.
it would be wrong to do it all together?
It's just a matter of when you take a look at the income statement, when you take a look at the balance sheet and the income statement, it just gives you a better, you can manage your business better.
It's more descriptive.
It's just more descriptive. That if you were managing this business, you'd end up with the same expense, same net income, and you'd have the same total assets, right? But you wouldn't know what went into determining that.
This way you know where all the money's
This way,
going.
yeah, if you're managing the business, you probably want to know that. Mariah?
This is just hypothetical. If we were to add it, say like this happened on our test, this question, and we added it together and didn't separate it out, would that be considered wrong?
It all depends what the question asked.
Oh.
If it said, what's the depletion expense, or, you know, it all depends. If it said, what's the depreciation expense, and you lump them together, that would be the wrong answer. Because and again, depletion and depreciation, you know, they're the same idea. but one is a natural resource and one, and again, it's what you want to do is when you're managing the business, it's important to know depreciation of your building versus depletion of your mine. Okay. Yeah,
So because they said they plan on abandoning it, the 7-year useful life doesn't matter?
it's not relevant in this case.
Okay.
Yeah. However, can I just kind of build on that? Had they said, when the mine is played out, we're going to keep using the machinery, we're going to use the machinery on a different mine, then you would, then the, whatever that's, then the useful life, then you would, the useful life would go into play there. But that's, but when the, yeah. All right. All right. So let's take a look here. Now, let's get into intangible assets. Now, what happens here? Turn on the light. So let's take a look at intangible assets. Excuse me. Let's see. Go over here. Okay. All right. So, intangible assets. So, they're non-current. So what does non-current mean? Just means greater than a year, right? With no physical substance. Okay, and we're talking about like a copyright, a patent, that sort of thing. Now, an accounts receivable has no physical substance. Why is it, but it's not intangible? Intangible assets often confer rights. Well, they do, they confer rights, often monopolistic, okay? And so what we're saying here is, like one category in here is a copyright. If you have the copyrights to a book or whatever, you have the exclusive right to that book, okay? If you're making medicine, you got the exclusive right to that medicine. The useful life can be difficult to determine. Okay. And it's usually for operational use. Okay. All right. Okay. Now, what are we talking about here? Okay. What are we doing for time? 3:20. Okay. Now let's see, there's only really one thing that I want to go over that we don't. So, yeah. And so we talked about the fact that every asset is valued at what you pay for it plus whatever it costs to get it in working order, right?
Yes.
All right, so there's just a couple things that I want to go over. So what we're talking about here is we're talking about things like patents, copyrights, leasehold. What that means is you have the lease to the property. A leasehold improvement, what that means is, for instance, suppose you have an espresso stand and you need to hardwire it and you need to run plumbing out to it. However, when you abandon that espresso stand, you're going to leave the hardwiring and the plumbing behind. That's called a leasehold improvement. You're leasing, but you also put in something you're going to leave behind, something permanent, like wiring or whatever. That's a leasehold improvement. A franchise. Goodwill. Now, goodwill, what that is goodwill comes about only when you buy a business, right? So when you buy a business, what you do is, so what you got here is the cost minus the market value of the assets, that equals goodwill. So what happens here is the fact that here's what you pay for the business. You value the assets, and it would be and often you'll pay more because you're buying a going concern. You're buying a stream of future cash flows, right? You're buying a business that's working. So, and that difference is called goodwill. Now, if you have something like a patent and a copyright, often it's amortized, and of course amortization is the same as depletion, it's the same as depreciation, except it applies to intangible assets, but you amortize it often on a straight line basis. Goodwill is an exception. With goodwill, you have to amortize it based on impairment. So what you said is, when I bought this business, I paid more for the assets because it has a great location. And then, next year, they put in a new freeway off-ramp. So your great location turns out to be worthless. So in that case, you could write off almost all of your goodwill if it was solely based on a good location. Does that make sense? That's an example of impairment. Of course, impairment's not easy to determine. Or suppose it was based on the fact that you had a great product, and next year your product was superseded with something. It was no longer a great product because something better came out. Okay? Then the goodwill would be amortized to be converted from an asset into an expense. Now, all of these things like patents, copyrights, etc., everything is at cost. Okay? And it gets a little bit more complicated than this. But what it is let's take like a patent. If you develop a patent on the job, the labor to develop that, whatever got patented, is written off as an expense, right, at the time? If by contrast you buy a patent from somebody else, then it's what you pay for it. So the difference is, if you develop something that gets patented, that labor is expensed when it occurs. Okay? If you buy it, then it's listed as an asset on your balance sheet, and it's listed at what you pay for it. So everything is at cost. The difference is labor. So for instance, let's take the Golden Arches. It'd be trademarked. The trademark for the Golden Arches, I must be worth billions, right? So if McDonald's developed it in-house, and they paid that commercial artist or whoever does that sort of thing, it would just show up on the income statement as an hourly wage or whatever for that guy. If they bought it from a third party and paid $1 billion for it, then it would show up on the balance sheet valued at $1 billion. Does that make sense? Now it gets a little more complicated than that, because what happens is, if you develop a computer program, it's expensed up to the point where you have a working model. And after that, the expenses are then what's called capitalized. They're turned into an asset. So there are quirks to this whole thing. As far as a patent goes, the thing that's unique about it is the cost of defending it in court is considered just run-of-the-mill. So when you defend it in court, that expense it increases the value of the asset. It's considered part of the asset. Okay, does that make sense? So there's quirks to all of these. Okay. Now, okay, the only other thing we really need to cover in this is when you have a lump sum purchase. Okay? And let's see if I can, now as I recall, what I did, isn't that one of these? Let's take a look. Market value. As far as a lump sum purchase goes, here's the way that works. And I'll put it over there so it's on the screen. Essentially what you do with a lump sum purchase is, so if you buy, and let me just put up numbers that are easy to work with, that'll be the way to do this. So if you buy land and building, okay? So you pay land, so you got the land, and you got the building. And let's say you pay $10,000. Okay? Let's say you pay $10,000. That would be the cost. So you got the land, comes with the building, right? House and improvements, right? and you pay $10,000. Now, on your incomes, or on your balance sheet, land does not depreciate, building does depreciate on a straight line basis, so they really have to show up as two different assets, right? But with this $10,000, how much of that went for the land and how much for the building? And I put up numbers here to illustrate it. Obviously, these numbers are too small, right? But they're just easy to work. In fact, let's make it even easier. Let's say you pay $10. That'll be really easy to work with, okay? So how much of this $10 will go for the land and how much to the building? Well, what you do is you get an appraisal. And the appraising says the land is worth $2. Let's make it, the land is worth, now let's do, the land is worth $5, and the building is worth $10, so the total appraised value is $15, okay? So what that means is 1/3 of this, we'll make it $3, it'll be 3.33, is how much you'll value the land at, and then the difference of, that'll be 6.66 will be the value. So what it boils down to is, this is 1/3, so 1/3 of 10, and this is 2/3, so 2/3 of 10. So what it is, does that make sense?
Are you talking in thousands?
Let's just make it $10. I'm just putting numbers up here that are
Okay.
easy to work with, and they're just for illustration.
Okay.
But yeah, just
So you're
numbers.
saying a third of the value is the land?
But exactly, so here's the deal. You pay a total of $10,
Okay.
but you have to, a portion, but some of that went for the land, some went for the building. How much? Well, what you do is you get an appraised value. So this is valued at 5, the appraisal for this is 10, the total appraisal is 15. So 1/3 of the value goes to the land. Now 1/3 of $10 is about $3.33.
Right.
And then 2/3 goes to the building, or $6.66. They're just numbers easy to work with, easy to see, okay? But they're not realistic, they're just workable numbers. And so that's how you do it. And because these two assets have to be listed, because they're different categories. Land does not depreciate, the building does. And you
So
guys
you just, you work out the depreciation based on the 2/3 amount?
based on the proportion.
Okay.
So 1/3 of the appraised value is the land. And by the way, Annie, if you don't put things the way people can hear me, you're leaving, okay, all right. 2/3 of the appraised value, and so 1/3 of the actual cost, and 2/3 of the actual cost are what you value the asset at.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure. You guys, nice job. Well, we're pretty much done. That'll do it. Hey, we'll see you on Monday. Okay. It is Monday, right?
Yeah.
Okay, all right. All right, but you guys don't go anywhere. We do have 10 minutes left. Let's have a review while it's fresh in our mind. Okay, we'll move it into long-term memory. I think we covered everything. Looks like Ed is graceful. No? All right.
A little bit on the last little bit you were doing there, but
But you got any questions?
no.
All right. So let's go ahead and have a quick review while we're in the business. All right, so, and you guys open things the way people can hear me better. All right. So here's the deal. How do you work it? If you dispose of an asset, if you buy an asset part of the way through a year, what do?
Partial depletion by
Partial depletion, you're absolutely right. How do you figure partial depletion?
Just take the,
Depends on the number of months you have remaining,
Mhm.
because you're gonna take the cost minus the sales price, divided by what number of months remaining, well, number focus. If you come up with a number, it's gonna be 3 months left, it's 3 over 12, come up with that final.
Sure, exactly. You figure of the year annual depreciation, multiply it times the portion of the year. Okay, and in this case it was all straight line, so you figure the annual depreciation, and in this case it was bought in October, so October, November, December, 3 months, so it's 3/12 of a year's depreciation because it was bought with 1/3 of the year left. Yes?
Would that be the same for the others, not just straight line?
Yeah, same with all of them. Yeah. Okay. All right. Now, what's it?
it's not the same with, units, when it's the units one.
Exactly, it would be,
Because it's just depending on how many units you
That's
produce,
exactly
by the
right.
time you sell it at.
that would be different. You're absolutely right. Yep, that one would be different. But, yep. I appreciate that, all right. And Tiffany's always up here thinking. All right. All right. Now listen, what do? You buy the asset and you estimated the salvage value, you estimated its useful life, but as life has gone on, all of a sudden you say, wait a minute, this is gonna be around longer or less, it's gonna be worth a lot more or less at the salvage value. What do you do when that occurs? Tiffany!
You change it.
You take it back, now you're right, but you gotta take it, now you gotta take it, you're right, you do change it, but there's what?
You just change whatever, if the salvage value changed, then you change the salvage value and recalculate it. Or if the lifespan changed, then you can change that one and recalculate it, or if they both change,
And what do you do with, what do you do with the book value in all of this?
you start with the book value?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, and it's gonna say, and when you start with the book value, so what you do is you take the book value, and so originally, what you did is it was the cost minus the salvage value over the useful life. Now, instead of cost, you use the book value minus, if there is a revised salvage value, minus the number of years left on the asset, if it's revised. Okay? All right. Now, okay, when you discard an asset, right? So what happens to this thing? You discard an asset. What's the first thing you do, whether you discard or sell an asset? What do you bring current?
The depreciation.
The depreciation, sure. So then, if you discard it, and it has some book value left, how much is the loss? Whatever the book value is, okay? All right? If you sell it, and you sell it for more than the book value, is there a gain or loss? Gain. If you sell it less than the book value, gain or loss?
Loss.
If you sell it for exactly the book value? All right. When you actually sell it, what do you do with the asset and the accumulated depreciation?
You have to record the accumulated depreciation and then remove the asset.
Exactly, so you remove all of it. Whenever you discard an asset, you remove everything. You debit the accumulated depreciation because that's a credit balance, and you credit the asset because it's a debit balance. You remove those. All right, now, when you have a natural resource, what do you call it when you extract it? Depletion. Depletion is very similar to what? It's very similar to what method of depreciation? Units of production, exactly. So it's very similar to the units of production. All right, so it's cost minus salvage value over total, and there's two steps in the process, right? So the first you figure the depletion per unit, right? So it's cost minus salvage value over total units of capacity. Then you take the depletion per unit multiplied by the number of units extracted. All right, now, on natural resources, suppose you have a building or machinery or whatever, and when the mine is played out, you're going to just abandon it. What basis do you use for depreciation? Perfect, proportionate to the depletion, exactly. Suppose you're going to keep using it for the end of its useful life, then that's its useful life. Okay, now, what's an intangible asset?
Like another
Copyright, patent, exactly.
Something that's not physical.
It's not physical, short-term, long-term. Long-term, non-current, okay? Why is it different from something like accounts receivable or bonds? Because they have no physical substance.
Because you actually own it.
You own it, that's because you own a bond.
But it's a value that
It's intellectual property that governs the rights of.
Okay, it confers rights. Okay, yeah, first of all, everything you say is true, it is intellectual property, but it's the rights that counts. Yep, all right. Now, when the intangible asset is used up, what do we call that? Amortization, exactly. And of course, normally that's on a straight line basis, sometimes it's on impairment. How do you calculate goodwill? Cost minus the market value. And how does goodwill become amortized? Impairment. Okay? You got it. Oh yeah, now, if you have a lump sum payment, right? If you buy something that's a lump sum, like you buy the building and the land come together, you pay one price for both of them. how do you determine the value of the building, how do you determine the value of the land?
Appraisal. Have
An appraisal, and then the portion of the appraisal that's the building is the same portion of the cost. You guys, that's it. We'll see you on, and by the way, you gotta check out the video on the chapter 10. Your voices will be in there. All right.
We don't have